Hi, everybody. This is Big Bill coming to you from YouTube Model Builders. Tonight, we're proud to present the second segment of Modeling Railroading Views. Tonight's topic is youth in the hobby. Our moderator for this show will be Miles Hale, and his guest panelist will be Ron Marsh from Ron's Trains and Things, Andy Crawford, of course you know, from YouTube Model Builders, Lloyd from MHO Junction, and Ralph Renzetti, the Mudfather. Tonight's show, again, is Youth in the Hobby, and thank you so much for watching and tuning in. Take care.
Well, I want to welcome everybody back, and now we want to go ahead and maybe try and wrap up some of our thoughts. I'm not sure that any one of us has the absolute perfect answer, but we certainly want to take an in-depth look in conclusion about what we think it's going to take to get people into the hobby and keep them here, enjoying model railroading and enjoying trains in general. I think this hobby has more diversity than probably any other hobby out there on the planet. You can be a photographer, you can be a collector, you can be a builder, you can be, so many things, and still call yourself a model railroader. And this huge umbrella, and yet we're just not captivating enough people under it to keep them out of the reign of all the other hobbies. So at any rate, we'll try and wrap up some of the ideas. I started with Ron before, but let's start with Ralph this time. He's always been kind of the end of the string. So, Ralph, what do you think?
Well, this is only an observation. A couple of things. I worked in a hobby store, 10 years. The store finally closed down. But the boss said to me when I first started to work, he said, you watch the people that come in. He said, I can tell you whether they're model railroaders or whether they're military or aircraft guys, just by the way they look at things in the store. He said the military guys will come in and they'll go to the left and they'll do the whole store. The railroad guys come in and they do just the railroad section. And then they want to know where the paints are. Well, that's over on the other side. They don't really want to go over there because it's the military side, but that's where the paints are. So, any opportunity I got when a young kid came in and started asking questions about trains, I showed him what I thought he could afford. If he had more money or wanted to buy the expensive stuff, who am I to say no? But I try to push him in the right direction. And a lot of times they come back. Sometimes they don't. But trying to get them to stay is the big deal.
Andy, thoughts?
And that you can summarize my thoughts on how to grow the hobby into one word, although I'll, of course, put a little bit more verbosity on that, as you guys know me, but is engagement. And that means engaging them where they are, and that means social media and things like this experience that we all have here, the social aspects of the hobby, engagement. And that also means that I think the biggest damaging thing we've done in the hobby is by subdividing the hobby. Oh, they're O-scale guys or Lionel guys, or they're craftsman guys, or they're operators or not. And we've had all these separations and cliquish nature of it, which I think is, not to tie this to another topic, but I think has been part of the problem with groups like the NMRA and others, is this segmentation of the hobby. We are not a large enough hobby that we need that separation and that segmentation. And I think it does nothing but damage us, is to engage people and to engage them wherever they are, whether that's, technology wise or geographically, but also to engage them wherever they are in their journey as a hobbyist.
Yeah, I want to speak to Ralph saying, I got to tell him my quick story. I told everybody else while we were off there a little bit, but when we started off our classes, I always hand them an N-scale bridge section from Atlas. And I ask them, the class, what is that? And there's always one student there, that's an Atlas bridge section. And the first thing I say is, the first time I ever saw that was on the roof of an O-scale engine house on Laurel Joyner's big O-scale railroad. And it was a roof truss. It is a truss. It's not an N-scale bridge section. It's a truss. And in N-scale, it's a huge truss. In O-scale, it was a small truss. But it's a truss. And I think that speaks to Ralph's comment that you need to go around the hobby shop and look around and see what else is there. There are all kinds of fasteners in the aircraft aisles that are just absolutely phenomenal for doing things in model trains. And don't forget to accompany your wife to the sewing store. Man, do you get some brownie points for doing that. And let me tell you what, the Notions thing over there with scissors and pins, and I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Ribbons and strings and stuff that they use are just great. Don't not go to the kitchen store. That's a treasure trove. The art store, all of that stuff. You really need to kind of open your mind up to things that can be used in your model railroading. Lloyd, go ahead.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, the first time, once I started the hobby, I went to Michael's with my wife, and I spent more time at Michael's than my wife did. It was like, are you finished? I was all over the place. There was so much stuff in there. But I think we got to ask our question, is this a hobby? Because a hobby is, you're supposed to be able to do stuff, build, scratch building. Just remember, I think during your time, Miles, you had the blue box where you had to build those cards.
Lloyd, we still have blue box.
No, I know.
We still have blue.
Just joking. But it was to build. And I can just see, like, the kids today, if parents do get involved with their kids, doesn't matter what age. I mean, there's so much they could do. And in so much time, you don't have to build a layout, a 4x8 layout in 1 month. You could take a year to build it. But there's so much that can be done. So
I really admired one lady came to the Amherst show to our clinics there, and she was a single mother and she had a son, and she was there to learn model railroading because she wanted her son exposed to, maybe quote unquote, a more male oriented hobby. And I don't really want us to think of it that way, but I really admire her for making the effort to come in there and trying to learn something that maybe her son would be a little more interested in than playing with dolls or something, hopefully, maybe, whatever. Anyway, Ron, your thoughts.
G.I. Joe.
Yeah,
well, I think, again, this is kind of echoing what Andy said a moment ago, but I think if we're going to draw anybody into the hobby, we've got to get the hobby in front of them. I came into the hobby as a young adult. How did that happen? Well, it happened because I just happened across a model railroad shop, and I had an interest in trains anyway, and found the hobby of model railroading. It got in front of me. I read magazines. I did those things. Well, we all know brick and mortar shops are getting to be fewer and fewer. We know that, paper magazines, we're seeing, they're, tapering off. We don't see near the subscription. We don't have as much there. How do we get the hobby in front of people today? I think we do it through social media. We do it through, quality Facebook groups. We do it through YouTube channels that can show them the hobby, but show it to them on a variety of levels where they can see something that is appealing, something that is interesting. And hey, I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to experience that. I think I can do that. And also with the social media, we can not only show them the hobby, but we can build a community with them. They can get to know some people who are in the hobby and find out something about what their experiences are. I really think that's key.
I want everybody to stay tuned because before we sign off, we're all going to do a rah, for YouTube model builders. Anyway, Andy, go for it.
And this is not a new concept about reaching people technologically. This is how all businesses do this. As a business owner, the yellow pages and billboards and the radio is not the way that I reach customers these days. It's via social media. It's via Facebook, love or hate that platform. That's how I get new customers. I was just at a big, one of the largest trade shows for my industry in Las Vegas just recently, and that was a big part of that as well. But most business owners recognize that. We have not done the hobby a service by realizing it as early as we should have, with some parts of our hobby absolutely opposed to those things. And we're doing a disservice by not using those social and technological avenues to reach people. But I also think this also means engaging people regardless of what their interest is, without a diminutive or a separative way of doing it. If you're interested in three-rail Lionel, I am still fascinated to talk to you about it. I have no separation in my viewpoint of where you're at with a hobby, but also to Lloyd's point about it is the idea that everybody has to be a builder. Not necessarily. There are plenty of hobbies, like photography is not a build-it hobby. The hobby means whatever you want to do in it, whatever interest you want to be. If you want to buy everything, fine. It's going to be expensive, but you can buy your railroad. You are still just as serious a modeler if you are just interested in the operations part and don't care as much about the building aspect as you are the guys who don't care anything about operations but just want to build structures, you're just as big a part of our hobby.
Well, that's the one thing that I really think is absolutely phenomenal about this hobby is I can buy still cameras and movie cameras and do photography and call myself a model railroader. And I can collect railroadinia, lanterns and spikes and whatever have you. I mean, all those things come into the realm of being a model railroader. And trust me, I'm having a blast doing them all.
I think Andy hits a really good point there too. That is honestly one of the pet peeves of mine and has been for years. I'm an N-scaler, but before I am an N-scaler, before I was an N-scaler, I was a model railroader. And I just find model railroading generally fascinating.
Yes.
And if I go to a train show, I'm gonna go look at everything that's there, and some of it may be really good, and some of it may be really lousy, but I can learn something from all of it. And I hear so many guys that say, well, Model Railroader magazine, or this magazine, or this place, they don't have any N scale, or they don't have any O scale, and I get we all kind of like to see our little sub niche represented. But I just love looking at model railroads, and I don't care if it's N scale or HO or O or G or whatever it is. It's fascinating, and there's stuff that I can learn from all of those things that I can employ on my own layout. And I think we get too caught up sometimes in our own little sub niche, and I've probably gotten way off topic here, but
no,
I think we need to give credit to the hobby in general.
I totally agree, Ron. I'm subscribed to maybe 20 Facebook page, and a lot of them are N scale, O scale, like any scale, or just the building aspect, or just the diorama aspect. I just go through it to get ideas and even learn stuff from everybody.
And from areas that are outside of trades, like the military guys. I've said before, if you care about weathering, you have to be paying attention to what the military guys are doing. They're a decade or more ahead of us always. If you care about scenery and landscape, what the Warhammer guys, the wargaming guys are doing. So interest in all these various aspects of the hobby. Now, as an entry person new into the hobby, granted, you probably need to be spending a lot of time learning the ins and outs of this specific hobby of being a model railroader. But as you grow in the hobby, widening your spectrum and realizing, and that's a good thing to engage with the new people coming into the hobby. This is not a narrow hobby, not at all. Like, I agree with Miles completely. This is the widest hobby I have any knowledge of.
Sorry, go ahead.
I want to know, at what stage do you consider kids having an iPhone or a phone, a cell phone?
As soon as they're in school. I would not send a kid to kindergarten without a phone these days. Maybe that'd just be a flip phone, but there's no way I would send a kid to school without a phone. You see the
youngest kids with cell phones.
They're not going to be able to do what you can do on a smartphone, on a flip phone. I'm talking smart.
Right, a smartphone. This day and age, flip phones are basically dead anyway. There's very few of those even available. So any kid getting a phone these days is going to be a smartphone. And if you don't want them to have that cellular connectivity, an iPod Touch is still an entirely valuable device that will give them the social connectivity. And I am an Apple fan, so I'm going to be encouraged to support that, because Android, there's not an equivalent in the Android space that is not a phone. But the iPod Touch, for all those people who are worried about giving that to younger kids, there are very good parental controls over that as well, and time limits. But you let them get engaged with so many things, whether it's this hobby or so many other aspects of life, because the world is there. The world is on that screen.
You see 2- and 3-year-olds using iPads. I mean, that's,
Oh, yes, I agree.
I've said
that's just get out of my face. It's a babysitter.
And I'm saying, as an IT guy, I'm an IT professional, and I've said, as an IT guy, guys like me that are gray haired have really got it to do when these kids are in the crib with an iPhone, with technology, in a way that I was not even as a young guy. Us IT guys have really got it to do, but I think that also applies to our hobby as well. We've got it to do to keep up with these kids who are engaged with the technology at such a level.
You've got to remember that these kids are coming out of grade school knowing what we knew when we graduated from high school,
if not college.
That kids 3-, 5-, and 6-year-olds are coding.
Yes.
I couldn't code a program if I tried. You could, Andy, but I couldn't. These kids are doing it at 5, 6, and 7. And there are preschool toys that will teach them how to code, or at least get them in the thought processes of going through coding. So, no, I mean, yes, it may be babysitting, but you can never take away the fact that if they're in their hand, that whatever it is in their life.
It's a much better babysitter than TV. And it's a much better babysitter than TV because there's such an educational element to all that technology. Of course, that's off topic being in modern railroading, but it's also the way to engage with them is the educational element as well. And a lot of the kids these days are interested in things that we may not have been at a younger age as well.
Well,
educational value.
Things we never knew about.
Well, no question about that. But educational value, they're interested in things that educate them. That's not they're not discouraged by things that educate them. They're excited by those things that engage their mind. Our hobby can do that, but I don't think that we have positioned ourselves or that we have sold the hobby for its value as an educational element.
Yeah, don't get me started on the fact that it's a good thing to do, because as an old PE teacher, I think they ought to put that cell phone down and go out and play ball or pick up a stick and play pretend, do anything, but get out there and do some activity. But if they're going to have it and they're going to look at it, I sure wish we had more apps that would intrigue them and engage them, as you said, Andy, into our hobby.
Absolutely.
And anybody else, any final thoughts, or we pretty much wrapped on that one, I think. And I think we've all expressed kind of the same viewpoints, but we've all come around kind of the same view. Good, Ralph, do you have something?
No, I can't think of anything right now, and it may be too late later. But trying to keep them engaged is the major thing, right?
That's right. Yeah, that engagement is the big thing.
Or people are going to have to start changing the mentality towards the hobby.
Well, and I think the biggest change is going to have to happen with the 5 panels that we have up right now, because we in our age group, those of us that are, above 20, have got to start changing the way that we think, because as we said, when we grew up, the things that these kids are involved with now, we didn't have. I didn't have, a computer. I didn't have a calculator when I was going through high school. I was still doing the slide rule. So my thinking process is nowhere near what it is with the young people that are coming up now that are learning, like I say, so many things so much earlier than what we did. There's so much more we know about our existence, our life, and in our future. And I hope that model railroading will survive into that time. But that's a subject for another time and another one of our shows to talk about what's happening with model railroading. But anyway, I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening to us. We've had a great time talking about it, and I hope maybe we've given you some insight in go out and push some manufacturers and push some people that are creative to make some apps, and let's get some people involved in our hobby. Have a great time. Go down to your railroad room and let your trains put a smile on your face.
Hi, this is Big Bill coming to you from YouTube Model Builders. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion tonight that we presented to you. Please tune in next Friday after 3 p.m. when we will post another discussion on model railroad views. Thank you for watching. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you on the radio.